All right, welcome to part 2 of the Eevee Archviz series. This is what we're going to have by the end of this part. We're going to be taking that scene from the start, and we're going to be adding a wooden floor with nice reflections, a window with glass that is reflective but still transparent, a background, so you've got something through the window, as well as some indirect lighting, casting bounces around it, and just getting it something that looks nice. All right, let's start by adding a wooden floor because it's looking very papery right now. Everything is diffuse. So in edit mode, it's very hard to focus with everything glitching around. I'm just going to select this bottom face here like this, and underneath the material, I'm just going to add, I'm just going to hit assign actually on that empty slot right there. And then actually, you could just go ahead and create your own material from any text you found online. I'm going to be using some polygon wood, which means I can use the material converter, which means you don't have to set up all those nodes. Essentially, you just basically tell it where you've been saving or unzipping all of your polygon textures to, and then you just select it from the list. So it's this one right here. I can see I've downloaded it in a number of different sizes, but I just select that check mark and then I hit load one material. And then that's it. I just select that new material from the dropdown. There it is. So I hit that, and there we go. So there you go. It's applied to the floor. It's way too big right now. We've got these little size parameters at the top here. So I'm just going to set these to 10, just so it looks something reasonable. And it's looking okay, but it looks a little bit diffuse, right? Like it looks like it's not reflecting anything. And that's because it's actually not. So by default, Eevee has reflections turned off. So screen space reflections, just turn that on. That's basically all you need to do. And now you can see it. It's still a little bit diffused because of the material, but you can see we do actually now have some reflections. So let's just tweak this material. We are actually making some changes to the add-on so that you don't need to do a lot of this tweaking out of the gate. But we have noticed that this roughness slot, so this is what by the way, this is what the add-on created, this whole setup here. But this roughness value, we discovered that Blender actually is different to all the other shaders that we tested it on, in that this should actually be half the roughness that it is. So to do that, we just add in a math node. Maybe by the time this goes out, a couple of weeks after, I don't know, this should be updated. But anyway, you just add in a math node set to multiply 0.5, and that just basically halves anything you put that through. And there you go. I also want to tweak the normal map. So this normal map is going to control sort of like the tilt of the, actually set that bump, okay. Yeah, this is going to control sort of like the tilt of the wooden floor pieces. I actually don't like the split of this shader, like going horizontal. I don't know why they went horizontal, but I feel like vertical would have been a better pick. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about that. So this bump value, this is like using the displacement map. That's going to control like how heavy this like cut in these boards is, like that gap there. So I'm just going to set that to about a 0.2. And it's looking pretty good. Okay, so going back to layout, and there we go. So it looks okay, but something you might notice is that we've got like a floor reflection there, but then as you move the camera up, like the reflection starts to disappear. And this is a limitation of the screen space reflections. So screen space reflections will basically look at anything, like it's casting reflection on this chair even right now, and it'll do a pretty good job, but it has like a cutoff, like a fall off distance of what it will actually calculate. So as my camera moves up at a certain angle, it just starts to cut away that reflection. So this is where you need to use something called a probe, which, we won't make any jokes, is basically to force the real-time render. And you use these in Unreal Engine as well. It's basically to tell it like, hey, this is something we actually want to reflect, right? Like this is something with a lot of reflection, so I want to calculate extra reflection here. So the way we do this, I'll just position my cursor just at that chair there so I can find this probe easily. Shift A, light probe, reflection plane. So there's two, there's cube map or there is plane. Cube is for like a big like an object that you want to cast within it, like inside these bounds, it'll look like this. But we want it for the floor, so I'm going to click reflection plane. I'm just going to scale this up to about that. Now, looks like the opposite's happened. It has removed some reflection. So the first thing you want to do is underneath your viewport display of this plane, just enable show preview plane. And what you'll probably find is that if it looks dull or like something's wrong, it's underneath the plane. So if you just grab it and move it up slightly, you should see this. So that's what show preview plane is. It's just showing you, or show data, they might have changed the name. It's just showing you what it's actually capturing right now. It won't actually render like this, but it's showing you what it's actually capturing. So I'm just trying to make it fill, however much the camera is going to see. By the way, now might be a good time to change the perspective of my camera a little bit, because I want it to be like a vertical looking frame like that. Okay, so everything that the camera is going to see is like the plane is filling that. In fact, it's probably a little bit too big. I don't know how much it would actually contribute to an increased render time if you made this bigger. Probably not much. But anyway, once you got that, go ahead and uncheck show preview plane. And now it's actually using this reflection plane. So if I hit H, this is what it looked like with the screen space reflections. You'll see that reflection there, right? See how it's disappearing? And then if I hit Alt H to bring it back, oh crap. I think I had another area lamp in there. Yeah, it must have been this guy, I guess. I'll turn him off. Okay, let's try that again. Probe, turning the probe off. This is how it looks. And then turning it back on. There you go. Very slight change. And it's better at different angles, you'll see it, but it essentially enables you to get like a proper nice reflection that isn't like faked. You also sometimes get like this kind of grainy, smudged look with reflection. So this basically fixes that. In fact, now while I'm at it, I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna make this a little shinier. Like if I turn down this multiply amount, you can see that the wooden floor gets shinier. So I don't know, 0.3, let's try that. There we go, now I can actually see the reflection a bit better. Haha, okay. Lovely. So that's the wooden floor. The wooden floor is going the wrong direction though. Like I want it to sort of go away from the camera, like it's an elongated room. So I'm going to go UV image editor, and I'll just select the room. Oh gosh. Okay. Turn off solidify in the edit mode just so that I can see the actual mesh here. I'm going to hit Control E and then go mark seam, unwrap, and then unwrap like that. And if I'm lucky, there we go. It's actually rotated the correct way. If it wasn't, then I would just have to like select this and rotate it. But anyway, it's correctly rotated, which is nice. And now I can really see these planes. They're looking a little wonky. So I'm going back to the shader, and I'm going to change this. By the way, if you don't like, this is looking at look dev mode, but you can switch to rendered view mode in the shading thing. So let's just do that. Now if I turn down this normal, it's making the planes look less wonky. By the way, I don't know if this is a bug with Filmic, with the 2.8. For some reason, like non-color data used to be correct for displacement and normal maps. But I just noticed like you get this kind of stepping issue, even though this is a 16-bit TIFF, which generally would have stepping. Filmic log will actually create a better result. So Filmic log was like a new feature in 2.8, or I don't know if it's a feature, but it's a new addition. It just suddenly appeared, and it creates a better result. So if that's the way forward, if that's the way it's going to be, then we'll have to update our add-on. But I only just discovered this like a few hours ago. So anyway, fixing these little glitchy shapes appearing along the wooden floor there. One of those problems that happens when you make tutorials and products for Blender 2.8 when it's in beta. Anyway, looking pretty good. So now, it looks okay, but there's nothing outside the window. It's a gray, dark, post-apocalyptic world outside. So let's add a picture, right? You could just have like a white plane outside if you want to make it look really overexposed, but I find a little bit of detail helps. And so I'm going to use this city texture, which I found on textures.com, our competitor to Polygon, but we don't have a texture like this, so we're going to use this one for now. And I'm going to put this in the background. Now you could use the import images as planes add-on and just have like literally a plane in the background, But then when you move the camera, if the plane isn't there, then you see this dark background again, which isn't nice. So what I want to do instead is I want to put that texture on a cylinder, which is actually surprisingly easy. So if I just add a cylinder, and let's just, in this add cylinder here, just the cap fill, set that to none, and then that's just going to be basically a tube. Okay, scale this up like so, and then in the shading settings, oh gosh, the shading settings for this cylinder, I'm just going to delete this principled shader, and let's just go emission like so, and then I'm going to add in an image texture. Oh, hang on, yep, image texture, and this is going to be that one from texture.com that I just downloaded. So go here, there it is. Okay, open image, add that in, and there we go. So it's now UV unwrapped it to this plane here. Now, it's going to be stretched because it's based on the UV coordinates of this cylinder. So it's stretched it all the way around the cylinder. So with if I've got the Node Wrangler add-on turned on, which you should definitely have turned on because it's an awesome add-on, comes with Blender, you just got to turn it on. Then if I just, with this node selected, hit Control T, then it's going to add in these two nodes for us, which is, I don't know, just handy to have. And then if I increase this X value, it's now, basically choosing the scale of that image plane there. And I'll scale it up a little bit, like so. And I don't know, that looks okay to me. One other thing I want to make sure is that this grid floor represents the horizon of my scene. And it's actually really important that it lines up with the image, because you see a lot of people that actually get it wrong. And it, like, I'll just show you. Okay, so for one, my camera, the reason it's not showing up here is my camera has a clipping end of 100 meters. So just increase that until it appears. But yeah, if you get this wrong, this cylinder here, and let's say it was like this, and you look at it from the camera, like now it looks like, hang on, from the point of view of a render, it looks like, the apartment is falling over, right? It looks like things are tilted. Or if you get it like too low, then it's the opposite. It looks like it's tilting over backwards or something. So anyway, my point is this has to be lined up. Your grid floor has to be lined up with whatever background you've got. It's very important that that is correct. So now that I've got this, let me just rotate this until, I could also change the location here, until I get a nice part of the city that I want to see. Some sort of building. I don't know if that's a nice part. Hang on. Let's find a different part. All I'm seeing is like a slither of it, but I don't know, something like that, right? Just a hint of a city. And then this is the important thing with, like, anytime you're working with an interior scene or anything like this, you want to make sure that the exposure matches. So we've got a camera, and there's no way you could expose for this dark interior with a really bright exterior. So it has to be exposed correctly. So in this case, it's just got to be really blown out like that, right? Like that. That's realistic to what a camera would see for an interior scene. So there you go, and look at that. Now as you move around, you don't have, anything disappearing or whatnot. If you move the camera way down, you would see like the gap, but you could bring it back, extrude it in or whatnot if you wanted to. But that's pretty good to me. Great. The next thing we want to do is add a window. So back to the layout here. Whew, I'm getting dizzy. It's like you grab things and things just go, ah! It's like, it's really jarring. Anyways, yeah, I want to add a window here. So first thing, I want to make sure my 3D cursor is like, well, it's close enough. Okay, it's right there, that'll do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an add-on which comes with 2.8, and it is called Archipack. There's Archimesh and there's Archipack, and they do very similar things. They both have windows in them, but I actually find Archipack has more functional windows. So once you've enabled it, all you do is Shift A, Mesh, Archipack, Window. And you get this little pop-up and you decide what type of window you want. And I like the one which is flat 3. So just check that and look at this. We have a window. Now I can grab this and you can see it's got like little handles on it, which is kind of cool. Oh, hang on. Make sure you get it rotated exactly. I'm holding down Control while I rotate it, if you can't tell. And I want to get it just nicely in this window here. right about there. Okay, and then it's got, yeah, little handles, so I can move this out until, it's just hard to grab these handles. Like, sometimes you can click it and sometimes you can't. But in this case, it's working okay. One time I added it and I just couldn't grab the handles at all. So it's, it's a little glitchy, and at some point the handles will disappear and you won't be able to see them again. So I'm not sure what happens to them after a while. They vanish. Thanos flicks his fingers and they happen to be on the half of the world that got disappeared. But anyways, at some point they'll vanish and you won't be able to edit it again. But you can also just select everything and then just edit. 2.8 now lets you edit multiple objects at the same time, which is really cool. So you can, Anyway, so what's happened? We've lost our light because we've now put a solid object in the window. Maybe at some point the add-on will actually be working for Eevee and you won't have to do this. But for now, we've got just like a bunch of like empty materials for this window here. The one that we want to look at is window glass, for now anyway. So underneath settings, this is where you actually define your transparency for something. Like, well, this and also the shader. So the first thing though is like the shadow. So by default, it's set to opaque, meaning treat this like it's a solid object. If we set it to none, then it'll treat it like there's nothing there. And the shadow will there'll be no shadow. And it just goes through it like that. If you've watched any of my previous architecture tutorials, Cycles had this convoluted way of telling it to ignore glass. This is actually easier. So that's nice. It's now going through it. But we can't see through the window. So with our object there selected, you know what? I'm sick of this shading mode. It's too jarring for me. I'm going to split the view here. And let me just go to shader view. Okay. And I'm going to click use nodes. Oh, make sure you got the right material you're looking at. So I'm looking at window glass. Here we go. Now you could, if you wanted to, replace this with a glass shader, but it actually doesn't matter. The principled shader can become glass just by increasing this transmission amount to 1. That's now the exact same thing as a glass shader, basically, but you get all these extra settings. So that's kind of cool. So I'll set the roughness to 0 so that it's not frosted glass. It is glass. And you can see we've got some reflection on it, which is good, but we still can't see through it. So what's happening? 2 things we need to change. One, we need to turn on for our settings for the glass screen space refraction. So enable that. And then in your render settings where you've got screen space reflections, turn on refraction. And finally, we can see through it. It's still glitchy though, and that is because, going back to the settings here, as well as screen space refraction, you need to set a refraction depth to be something other than 0. And now we've actually got glass that looks like glass. Took me forever to figure this out, by the way. I couldn't really find any tutorials on it, and it was just a lot of clicking around. But this is how you do it. That's how you get a window. That's how you get glass that behaves like glass. So that's nice. I'm just going to quickly make the window look like it was painted black. So that roughness, turn it to, I don't know, 0.2, 0.3, something like that. By the way, if you wanted to, you could add a reflection plane on the window there. That would really, the thing is like you can barely see the reflection from the window anyway. So I don't think there's any point to it. I added one for my final render, but I don't think it really added much to the final scene. But there you go. So a couple of other things I'm going to do. I'm just going to add a concrete material to the ceiling. I'll do that quickly off camera so you can just see that. There we go, concrete one. That's from Polygon. Okay, there we go. It's not much, but it's a little bit of concrete texture to the roof there, going for an industrial, high-class, fancy boy apartment. And then the other thing I'm going to do is add some wooden, like, cupboards to this, to the background here. Very simple. It's just a plane with an array, with a solidifier modifier that's been UV unwrapped, and then I'm going to use this material from Polygon on it, and that's going to be our backdrop, really, for it, which is nice. There we go. And then the next thing I'm going to do is a couple of post-processing things to try and make this room feel like a room so we can start adding stuff and, get onto the final steps. But ambient occlusion if you turn it on, you'll see just very slightly where objects meet, particularly in like the corners of rooms, it'll just get a little bit darker there. And yeah, essentially this is to emulate what you see in the real world, which is where light bounces around a room, and the closer something is to an object, the less light can really get in there. So it just adds that little effect. So I generally increase its distance to be like 0.5, something like that. If you really wanted to, you could increase the factor, so it's like double what it normally is, which actually doesn't look too bad now that I think about it. I do actually like that. It kind of looks a little bit more realistic. And the other thing is Bloom. Oh, Bloom, this guy, which everyone loves because, it's like real-time glow that you previously in Cycles, you had to use like going to the compositor and everything. Really easy. You just check set the threshold to something like, I just want it to be the window, essentially. Like that is where I want the glow to be coming from. So you want to set the threshold until it's just the window. You don't want anything else. Like things start to look like way too bright for everything. It's not going to look good. So part of this value here will be directly dependent on how, like the value that you gave this emission plane here, which is part of the reason I set it so high, so that it's got like a real value that you can actually, like that would match the real world. So that my glow is only going to show up there. So just a little bit of glow, and then I make the radius big and I turn the intensity of that glow down so that it's not like overpowering. It's just a hint of glow. That's good. All right, now the final thing I'm gonna add in here, and we're gonna tweak this later on in the next part once we add objects, but indirect lighting is something that Cycles is really good at because it's ray traced and light enters the scene and it bounces around the scene and you get accurate light at the cost of like a 22-minute render per frame, which is just, it sucks. But why do that for every single frame when you can calculate it once and then bake it? And that is this great feature, which is the irradiance probe, which sounds scary and it looks scary. It's like a cube with a bunch of little dots in it. But what this does is, if I just scale this up, you want to position it so that like there's like two cubes, one cube inside another, till like both cubes are outside of like the top of the ceiling and the floor, whatever. And then you want to scale this way until it fits, most of the objects in your scene. That's really all there is to it. As I mentioned, we'll tweak it once we add more objects later on, but the default settings like this will work fine. And then all you need to do is go Indirect Lighting and click Bake Indirect Lighting. And it'll do this, bada bing, bada boom. And you'll see that now you've got like a little bit of a glow like on the ceiling, like a little bit of light that has reflected off that wooden floor and onto the ceiling. The other thing I'm going to do as well is currently we've got like a kind of a gray background, which is actually contributing some light to the scene. So any environment world lighting that you add is not going to treat it like Cycles. It's not going to like shoot and like be occluded by shadows and things. It's just going to light everything uniformly. So if you set this to be like this, like you would see, right? Like if this is red, you can see how this world lighting is influencing everything. So generally you don't want to use world lighting at all, except I find that Eevee will make things look a little bit too dark. Like a real interior will have so much bounce going on, you'll have a little bit more light. So I generally try to keep this like at a 0.1, and that will just help it feel like a little bit more realistic. Like it's kind of faking it. It's infusing a little bit of extra light, but it'll just, generally speaking, make things feel a little bit nicer. And that's basically it for this part. I'm just gonna tweak the floor. So I'm gonna add in just right here a saturation hue value node just on this color. I'm just gonna turn down the value and the saturation, and I'm gonna set the hue to be slightly reddish, like 0.48, which is slightly changing the hue. And this is just to try to match it with this backplate here. And this is how you can basically make materials that weren't designed to go together. You can make them match each other. A very simple little thing you can do. All right, that is it for this part. Go ahead and join me in part 3 as we do the final scene render.